Few cars can strike the balance between class and performance like an Aston Martin. They pair elegant design with focused power, and in the modern era, Astons have not only continued to be some of the most beautiful cars on the road, but also stepped up their performance. The Vantage was the alternative to a more clinical Porsche 911, an upgrade on your Mercedes AMG, and a more refined version of a Maserati. This generation of Vantage really modernized the British sports car with more tech, power, and sleek new styling, making it quite desirable and competitive. Even as the entry-level Aston model, the Vantage brought all the same appeal of the older sibling DB11 and DBS. But like most high-end, very expensive cars, they depreciate, and oh boy, do they depreciate hard. Welcome to Exhausted Reviews, enthusiast-focused car reviews. My name is EddieX, and today we are experiencing this 2019 Aston Martin Vantage. This era of the Vantage really modernized the entire vehicle. We have all new styling, drawing inspiration from the DB10 from the Bond movie Spectre. It has a new platform, new powertrain, using a bonded aluminum structure that first came out on the DB11, although the Vantage had 70% new components. When this was new in 2019, this specific car stickered for $187,000, and now recently it was just purchased by my friend with 6,000 miles on it for $86,000. Talk about an utterly insane depreciated deal. In terms of the powertrain, this generation of the Vantage got rid of the previous naturally aspirated V8. Instead, we have a Mercedes AMG sourced 4-liter twin-turbo V8. Here it makes 503 horsepower, 505 pound-feet of torque. During this generation, they did offer a Vantage with a V12, but those are extremely rare and extremely expensive. It is paired with a ZF-sourced 8-speed automatic transmission, rear-wheel drive only. During this generation, they did also offer it with a manual transmission, but those are also pretty rare. So the majority of them are the twin-turbo V8 with the ZF-sourced 8-speed auto. 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds up to a top speed of 195 miles an hour. But how does that compare to the latest updated Vantage? Well, that still has an AMG-sourced 4-liter twin-turbo V8, but now it makes 656 horsepower. So yes, they gave it a massive increase in power, but that new Vantage is extremely expensive, and this one is not because it's depreciated. Now let's talk about design. Aston Martin has always made some of the best looking cars out there, especially in the modern era. Some trend towards more pretty, some are more track focused, some are more brutal. Take a look at the Valiant and Valor. They kind of evoke the 80s era of more brutal styling. The Valkyrie is a straight up race car. And then you have some more pretty curvy designs like the Vanquish, the DBS, the DB12, and of course the Vantage. Now this generation, like I mentioned, draws inspiration from the DB10. That was more of a one-off for the Bond movie, but you have the smaller headlights here, the still iconic Aston front grille shape. This one is a first model year, so it has the mesh fill-in on the grille. It's got a subtle bulge there on the hood. And what Aston does so well are the proportions, the ratios, the curves, the hips. It just looks absolutely beautiful, unmistakably an Aston Martin. Some technical things. Instead of these side strakes, we've got these gills here, these vented inserts on the front quarter panel there, and it's designed to relieve pressure from the wheel well. We have the Aston Swan doors, of course, that open at a slight upwards angle, which is quite useful if you park next to a curb because this is a very low sports car. I think my favorite angle of the Vantage is the rear 3/4. I just love the curve of the taillights over the hips. I think this Vantage is aging so well. It's technically 5-6 years old at this point, but unless you parked it next to a brand new Vantage, this would still look like the latest one. On the inside, this Vantage definitely prioritizes buttons. There's a lot of them. So we have the park, reverse, neutral, drive with the engine start-stop button in the middle forming this triangle, and there's a couple different zones of buttons. Plenty of physical toggles and dials for your climate. And I've been guilty of complaining about cars having too many touchscreens, especially the modern ones. And this Vantage definitely does not go for that. We just have one small display screen here, an 8-inch screen that runs a previous Mercedes system. And that is already a massive improvement from the older Vantage's system, which was like unusable. It felt like a mid-2000s Garmin GPS head unit. It was pretty terrible. But now compared to the latest Vantage, which now has Aston's own 10.25-inch screen, their own infotainment system, this is still a step behind, but I do give credit to the fact that there's physical buttons that are helping this just still stay fine. I mean, buttons don't go out of style per se, right? Whereas touchscreens can definitely show their age. The rest of the interior's got nice leather, Alcantara. We've got an Aston quirk, which is the seat controls on the inboard side, on the center tunnel. They're not on the side of the seat. They're not on the door. We've got this kind of square steering wheel, paddle shifters fixed to the column, digital cluster in the middle, and you also sit really low in the cabin. It has a very high belt line, so you feel like you're sitting in the car, almost as if you're in a bathtub of sorts. But I'd say this interior is aging pretty well. We're gonna start off by grabbing my good friend Alex, Automotive Alex.
Hello.
She is the owner of this absolutely beautiful and also beautifully depreciated Vantage, right? And we're gonna start off by chatting with you about why you bought this car. So like, tell us, what made you buy a very lightly used Aston Martin Vantage?
So I've actually wanted a Vantage for a really long time. So I kind of have like a thing where I call it like the achievable dream car.
Okay.
Which is like, essentially it's a car that I really want, really love, and can afford. So for the longest time, it was the F80 M3.
Mm-hmm.
Achieved that, got it, had it for 2 years. And then it was, okay, you know, what's the next car that I really want? Like the next car on the dream car list that could be financially achievable. And looking at the depreciation on these, it was this car. I mean, I have wanted an Aston Martin Vantage, actually, honestly, since I was 18 in
Wow.
college, and they debuted this car, the launch spec, at the end of 18.
Depreciation definitely made it much more attainable, right? Like,
Oh, 100%. This would not be attainable for a long time if it was still what it cost originally.
yeah, I cannot imagine. So this one was $187 down to $86,000.
Yep.
How did you find this specific one?
Steven actually found it.
Okay.
So I got a big raise at work, and I was like, okay, I can achieve the Vantage now. It's been like, you know, I've been talking about it for the last year and a half.
I remember
Now,
you, yeah.
like, it's almost as soon as I got the F80, it was okay, what's going to be like the next goal to work towards too? And it was the Vantage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been talking about it. I'm like, hey, I got this huge raise at work. It's finally doable. Let's start looking.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, his next question was, okay, which one do you want? I said, I want the mesh grille,
Oh, okay.
not the slatted grille.
Okay.
Little did I know how difficult that job was going to make his job of helping me find it, because it turns out they only made it with the mesh grille in 2019 and 2020. And then there was kind of like a refresh.
A mild
Yeah.
refresh, yeah.
And they gave it the slatted grille.
Mhm.
Well, that's when COVID hit. So because of that, very few cars came to the US for those 2 years. I believe it was some crazy low number, like only 1,000 Aston Martins in total came to the US.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, this car that I wanted was extremely hard to find. And with all these people who bought this car, they were just selling it back to the dealer, which meant that, and I don't want to buy from a dealership, I want to buy a private party, because in Arizona, there's no tax.
No sales
on a private
tax,
party.
yeah.
But that made it difficult, because there's very few private party for sale, and if they are, they're heavily modified, and that was something I wanted to do myself.
Okay.
So it was, okay, I can't find one that's not heavily modified, that doesn't have, you know, a ton
30,
and a ton of
40,000
miles.
yeah.
And I was actually kind of okay with mileage, but I didn't want to pay, you know, an arm and a leg for something with high miles.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. What's your favorite part of the car so far? What do you love the most about your Vantage?
That.
So you love Of the power, of the noise.
I love my biggest gripe when I first bought the car was it doesn't sound exotic. Like, it's not an exotic car. Like, the Aston Martin Vantage is not a supercar. I mean, it's a little exotic as in it's just not from the US, but it's,
okay.
So it's not really like...
You're self-deprecating your own car. I think they're pretty cool.
But it's not a supercar.
I would say, I agree, not a supercar. It's a top-tier sports car.
Exactly. It's that entry level, that weird in-between space.
Like an Audi R8, right? Like, what is it? Okay.
Exactly. Kind of that weird in-between space. Where was I going with this? What was
Sound.
the question? Sound. Yes. So I felt like but it doesn't have the sound. Like, the car looks beautiful, it looks aggressive. I mean, the tail lights on this thing are one of my favorite features on this whole vehicle. But the sound didn't match. It was just too quiet, too comfortable. So obviously I had to change that. So the sound is something that I absolutely love. The Velocity AP exhaust made this car, it's no longer so easy to drive. Like, it feels like there's an experience to driving it now. Like, I want to downshift and I want to hear that. Like, that's the experience of the car. So that was a really big thing.
Okay.
And then on top of that, I love the way it handles. So coming from the F80, honestly, my F80 made about 20 more horsepower than this did. Obviously the F80 was a little heavier, this is a little lighter, but I can use the horsepower. So getting into this car and being able to give it, like, actually, give it some, like, good gas in second gear, first gear even, like, I can use the power. I'm not spinning my wheels until third gear.
Yeah.
So that was really, really nice, was just being able to, like, have a car that felt like it's that perfect mix of where it has a great amount of power, especially for everything that I'm doing with it, but I can use that power, so that was really nice. I loved that. And then, honestly, I can't wait to customize this car. Nobody really builds Vantages, so the idea that I'm going to kind of be able to build this and make it really unique, and it's not going to be something that everybody's seen a million times, is also really special to me.
So is there anything you don't like about your car?
The sound was one thing I didn't love.
Okay, that one's been fixed.
I fixed that.
Yes.
Let's see. Honestly, I just love... Actually, yes. Oh my gosh, the doors.
Really?
Sorry.
The swan doors?
I love the swan doors, how they look when they're open.
Okay.
But they're not practical in a parking lot when you have people on either side of you, because you have to get that door to a certain extension, like opened a certain amount, for it to hold on its own. And because it's angled up, it wants to fall. Oh, Speedster!
Whoa!
Hello!
Porsche Speed. That's cool.
Sorry.
No need to apologize for that.
I don't see many 356 Speedsters.
Yeah,
that was cool.
That's cool.
So the doors don't want to stay up on their own until they hit a certain point.
Yeah.
That point is past where your parking space becomes the next parking space.
Okay.
Which means, unless you want to slam your door into the
No,
next
don't do
guy's
that.
car, which obviously you don't want to do, your door is trying to close on you as you're trying to get out of the vehicle the entire time.
Okay, so that's a little
it's not
annoyance
practical
when
for a
living
parking
with it.
lot,
Okay.
but also at the same time with this car, I'm not really parking next to a lot of people.
Yeah. Did you? I know you said you love the Vantage, but did you consider anything else cross-shopping against this? Because for this kind of money, what else could you get? I mean, this is a brand new Amira. It's a...
Didn't want the brand new Amira.
Okay.
I felt that it's just not... I wanted something that felt a little bit more me.
Okay.
And with the Amira, I just never felt like that instant draw to the car like I did with this when I saw its launch.
Yeah.
With the Amira, I just never felt that. So it was like then paying, nearly $90,000 was like for something that I didn't just initially feel that love for.
Okay.
And then also thinking about the depreciation of the vehicle, knowing that this is already, I mean, how much lower are these really going to get? Like, we don't know for sure, but it's not going to drop another $100,000. I mean, then they'd be giving it to you for $20,000.
You have to pay somebody to take it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It got to hit towards the bottom of the depreciation curve already.
Exactly.
Which is kind of crazy.
And how much, where else, what other car, can I get bang for your buck,
Yeah.
So that was one of the considerations. The other consideration I did briefly consider, and I only considered it because we were having such of a heck of a time finding a Vantage. This was hard to find. And Steven got lucky, and he knew I was looking for this, and he threw out a bid on Bring a Trailer that was within my budget, and then he went and got tacos. And then he looked down and he's like, oh, we won.
Accidental car purchasing.
And it was in my budget, and so it worked.
But What did you consider briefly?
I could briefly consider, sorry, I'm so ADHD, these little so I definitely briefly considered the first generation R8, and I was only considering it because it was just so hard to find this car, and I was like, okay, if I can't find a Vantage, what am I gonna get? Because at this point, I'd pretty much I'd taken the wrap off the M3, I'd listed it for sale. Like, there was, once the wrap came off, that personalization and connection was no longer there. So that was kind of a big thing of just, I needed to find something. If I couldn't find the Vantage, what else at that price point would I enjoy driving? And I honestly like the single clutch of the R8. I think it adds a lot of character and personality to the car.
Call it R-tragic.
When I drive a car, I don't want it to be easy and simple. It's one of the reasons, I'm gonna get so much hate for this, I don't love Porsches because they're too clinical. They're too clinical. It's too perfect. I want character. I want flaws. I want those little things that give the car that personality. And with Porsche, they're just too perfect at everything. I don't want something that's perfect at anything. I want something that's going to kind of kick me in the back, that's going to fight me a little bit, that's going to give me that character. So that was, because another thing was, Steve was like, well, what about a GT4? And I was like, it's just too perfect. It doesn't have enough issues for me to love it.
Is that why you love Steven?
Maybe you might be onto something there.
Congratulations, this is such a fantastic deal. When I was looking at the market, there are some amazing Vantage deals to be had out there.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Like, this is like a lot of car for the money. It feels brand new. Yours looks and feels brand new. Looking forward to seeing the mods. Enjoy it, and thank you.
Of course.
Right. That's pretty rapid. All right, so behind the wheel of this 2019 Vantage, I have driven a couple of this generation when they first came out. I actually got to try one of those AMR ones with the manual transmission. It was pretty rare. I remember not liking it that much with the manual. And I also remember feeling the huge change from the previous generation Vantage. That one had two different naturally aspirated V8s, ended up with a 4.7 NA V8. The transmission, if you went for the automatic, was not so great, the older clunky style. And then it was available with a manual. That one was nice. I actually, back in 2020, was bidding on Bring a Trailer. It was like the very beginning of 2020 on a manual transmission 4.7 liter Vantage. Ended up not buying it. Probably should have, looking at where prices have gone for those since then. But I've always seen the allure of the sportiest of the Aston Martins. And in terms of the sportiness, Aston did quite a bit to turn it up for this generation. So like I mentioned, all new platform, that bonded aluminum structure to bring the weight down, add the rigidity that you need in a sports car. This has a near perfect 50-50 weight distribution, which is very, very good for handling, even with the rear-wheel drive front engine layout. We also have a carbon fiber drive shaft, a electronic limited slip rear differential. It's got all the hardware to make this a proper driver's sports car. It's not just the luxury GT, take it to dinner kind of thing, pretend like you're James Bond. We have adaptive dampers. We're currently in the most firm mode. You can change them on the steering wheel here with the two buttons. We're also in Sport Plus. There's a track above. And this ZF 8-speed gives some pretty good downshifts. That's one of the big differences between this and the Mercedes AMG GT platform. So how does this compare to the latest generation Vantage? I did spend a week living with that, and I did really love it. It's quite a big change. I already mentioned the horsepower increase, They've updated the styling. The rear end still looks very, very similar, but the front end now evokes almost like a baby Aston 177. It's also a lot more expensive. The one I was driving was $280-something thousand, nearly 300 grand. It was fully loaded up as a press car demo, but it shows the big increase in price and even bigger price delta from this one to that one. When on paper, the ingredients are the same. It still has a 4-liter twin-turbo V8, it's rear-wheel drive, 8-speed automatic transmission, relatively similar bodywork, interior, and so forth. It's tweaks. But what they really did for the new one is stiffen it up, make it sharper. They were really focused on dialing down the understeer, a bit more oversteer. It was really talking about how they strengthened the various aspects of the chassis and so forth, right? And you can feel it. This compared to that is a little bit looser, feel a little bit more body motion. It's not quite as ballistic. But when you really think about the price difference, you're getting still, I would say, 90% of the brand new Vantage experience for 30% of the price. And that's just crazy, absolutely crazy. But talking about this Vantage on its own in a vacuum in today's day and age for $86,000 like this one, what is it like? Well, it's got plenty and plenty of power all through the rev range. It has torque now. Going to a twin turbo V8 means we have torque all through. With the exhaust on this one, it sounds good. The 8-speed automatic rips some pretty good shifts. Brakes feel pretty good. And it still holds true that they turn it into a proper driver's sports car. But it still has some of that Aston Martin elegance, the look. It is an entry-level exotic sports car, supercar. I really do think it's kind of on that threshold. It's some of the intangibles when you're talking about, does it qualify as a supercar, as an exotic, right? I just am absolutely shocked at the amount of depreciation these things went through. When this was brand new, base price was about $149,995, so 150 grand. You could easily option it up to 180 to 200. You could do carbon ceramic brakes. You could do custom paints. If you go to the Q by Aston Martin, their like customization program, the sky's the limit. You could really, really go crazy. So let's just say $185,000 car. Now there's so many for sale under 100,000. And I'm not talking about ones with 30, 40,000 miles. Some like this, sub 10,000 miles for $80,000 to $90,000. Some even in the 70s. That's a tremendous car for the money because it's not that old. It doesn't have some insane, potentially unreliable exotic engine. The electronics have gone to a lot of Mercedes stuff, so some of the concerns of the previous Vantage where some electronic stuff may fail, I think those may have been mitigated. I have not heard of any overwhelming catastrophic issues with these, right? Some platforms, depreciated enthusiast cars, you hear about them. Some do get inflated, but some are also valid. With the E90 generation M3's engine with rod bearings, IMS bearings on certain Porsches, right? The RS7, S7, S6, that 4-liter twin-turbo V8 had a turbo oil screen issue. So some of these engines have problems, but this is a Mercedes source 4-liter, and they put this 4-liter in everything. So do I think this is a fantastic deal for the money? Heck yeah. Heck yeah. Personally, again, styling is a very subjective thing, right? I never loved the front end. I have definitely said it kind of reminds me of an angry squinting Miata sometimes. And the mid-cycle update, or the newest generation Vantage, to me completely fixed that. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. I personally think the new Vantage is the prettiest car in the entire lineup. But again, styling is purely subjective, and this is still a really, really pretty car. When you roll up, people are like, oh, that's a brand new Aston Martin Vantage. Yeah, it's tremendous for the money, and this feels like real solid. Couple little squeaks I've heard while driving it today, but hand-built British car, that will happen. But the fit and finish is pretty good. The material choices are definitely nice, and like I said, in the interior, the button layout, that's going to stand the test of time. This screen, while basic, will still work, and it's a huge step up from the previous Vantage. I think these are a good buy right now, a really, really good option if you're looking for an entry-level sports car that, again, blends the elegance and a little bit of that sporty aggression, drives heck of a lot better than the previous generation Vantage, feels nice and modern, and you can get them for crazy deals, crazy good deals. So there we go. My review of the 2019 Aston Martin Vantage. We're going to be doing this series of videos under the umbrella of depreciated enthusiast sports cars, and this absolutely embodies it. There are so many of these kinds of cars out there, and today when everything is getting so much more expensive, average new cars are nearly $50,000 in terms of the average transaction price. Luxury cars, $80,000 to $100,000 is the norm for just a Mercedes sedan, right? Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. I just drove a GLC 43 AMG coupe that was $82,000. If I'm spending 80 grand, again, it doesn't make any sense to cross shop the SUV in this, but you kind of get my point. New stuff is so expensive, so let's go look for the used, lightly used or heavily used, depreciated deals and do some videos on that and have some fun. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Please go check out Automotive Alex on Instagram. I will link her account below in the description. She is a fantastically talented photographer, a good friend, and I always appreciate her letting me try out her cars and do a video. And this one, I'd say, is the best car that she has owned yet. Thanks for watching.